Then Paul took the men, and the next day, purifying himself with them, entered into the temple to signify the accomplishment of the days of purification, until that an offering should be offered for every one of them. And when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews which were of Asia, when they saw him in the temple, stirred up all the people and laid hands on him. So it's coming to a head now. Crying out, "Men of Israel, help. This is the man that teaches all men everywhere against the people and the law in this place, and further brought Greeks also into the temple and has polluted this holy place." That's some pretty strong accusations right there. They're laying it out as bad as they can toward Paul. For they had seen before with him in the city of Trophimus an Ephesian, who they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple. That's a Gentile. And all the city was moved. You know, there's a thing called mob mentality, when you can get a few people to stir up a whole lot of people, and the next thing you know, you got what we see today a lot of places. You got violent protests, you got people running wild in the streets, you got people, they may not necessarily believe fully in what's happening, but they're drawn into it through this is what everybody else is doing. Mm-hmm. If you got one person who's a good speaker, he can sway the opinion of hundreds pretty easily. And you've seen it. As we look back on things, let's take Jim Jones, for instance. Everybody remembers Jim Jones. You think, how could one man convince that many people to do what they did? But he was a great speaker. He was a good motivator. He had a charming personality. They say he just led them until they believed all the stuff he was telling them, up until the point of where they all committed to mass suicide. So, really, so, but that we in this room can't understand the mentality of the people that were with him. But it is easy to get a group of people to all do the same way. So what they're saying, it says that all the city was moved and the people ran together. So there's a whole bunch of people have got stirred up over what a few said. And they've decided, hey, this Paul guy is a bad guy. He did, but so did Obama. Obama's a great motivational speaker. Trump's just, his opinion is what his opinion is, and he don't care what you think about it. But the point of this is these people they all got tore up. They run together. They took Paul, drew him out of the temple. So he was in the temple. So here's the thing. They went into the church as a mob and drug him out and then shut the doors. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's most every kind of thing like this that happens in that time and up to including today. Most of those kind of things are built on suppositions. What one person thinks against what somebody else might think, and it causes a ruckus. And it really all depends on whichever guy's on whichever side, whichever one can get the most to follow him. And that's not changed. So they went into church and got him, which there's a mistake right there. Whether it's a Jewish church or a Christian church or whatever, they went into what they consider, these people that went after Paul went into what they considered to be a holy place and drug him out. So there's a fault on the people right there for doing that. So, and as they went about to kill him, this is how stirred up they was. Tidings came into the chief captain of the band that all Jerusalem was in an uproar. So, you know, whenever they're under Roman rule, if you go into well, let's just say you went in, if you started a riot in a prison, it ain't gonna take long for the guards to get there and start trying to break it up, because you gotta have order, you gotta have some semblance of authority. Well, in Jerusalem, the Romans were going to have a semblance of authority. I mean, they're not going to allow this kind of thing to happen. So they immediately took soldiers. As soon as they heard about this, they took soldiers and centurions and ran down to them where all the people were. And when they saw the chief captain and the soldiers, they left the beating of Paul. Then the chief captain came near and took him and commanded him to be bound with 2 chains and demanded who he was and what he had done. So they didn't really know what was going on. They didn't really know why this stir up was going on, why this protest or mob or whatever was doing what they were doing. They just saw who was the one getting the brunt of it. So they took him and they chained him. And then they demanded, who are you and what have you done to get all this worked up? And some cried one thing and some another, which is reminiscent of the trial of Jesus. When if you saw the movie The Passion, you remember when they had him in front of Pilate, there's some crying for his release or some crying for his crucifixion. So you got two different opinions even among the crowd that's got Paul. Some cried one thing, some another among the multitude. And when he could not know for certainty for the tumult, he commanded him to be carried into the castle. So this guy's in charge. He's hearing everything. And he can't figure out what's the truth. What is the truth? So what he does, he said, I'm just going to take Paul away from this. We're going to stop this. I'm going to take him away. And he carried him into the castle. And when he had come upon the stairs, so it was that he was born of the soldiers for the violence of the people. Born, which means they had beat him up enough that he was being carried. Soldiers were carrying him. And for the multitude of the people followed after, crying, away with him. It's so reminiscent of what they did for when Jesus was on trial. And as Paul was to be led into the castle, he said to the chief captain, may I speak to you? Who said, can you speak Greek? So here's the thing about Paul. He's a little bit everybody. Art not thou that Egyptian, which before these days made an uproar, and leddest out into the wilderness 4,000 men that were murderers? But Paul said, I am a man which am a Jew of Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city, and I beseech thee, suffer me to speak unto the people. And when he had given him license, Paul stood on the stairs and beckoned with the hand unto the people. And when there was made a great silence, he spake unto them in the Hebrew tongue, saying, and then he's fixing to say in chapter 22. So what he's convinced the captain to do is to let him address the same people that were just trying to kill him. Let me talk to him. So, and everybody calmed down. Everybody got quiet. I guess, in a sense, you're out here screaming and hollering for this guy to be put to death. They've carried him inside. You know he's been hurt pretty bad because the soldiers are carrying him at that point. They're still out here crying for him to be put to death, and all of a sudden he stands up on a ledge in front of them, and silence falls over the group. You just kind of imagine being in that position. So that's chapter 21. We don't have any comments. We'll move on to 22. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, yeah. It changes everything. So he's speaking to him in Hebrew. Now I don't know. Of course, he knew Hebrew, he knew Greek. You know, he probably knew some Aramaic. He may have known several different languages, but we know he knows Hebrew and Greek. So he speaks to him in Hebrew. Now here, all of a sudden here now, this guy that they've accused of blaspheming the law of Moses is going to speak to them in their own tongue, which it may be a surprise to some of these people. Now, I'm sure some of the people that were in this mob already knew who Paul was, and they would have remembered him from when he was a Jew against the Christians. And now he's flip-flopped, and now he's on the other side. So, but as he speaks to them in Hebrew, they began to listen. And he says, "Men, brethren, and fathers, hear you my defense, which I make now unto you." And when they heard that he spoke in the Hebrew tongue to them, they kept the more silence. And he said, so he's done surprised them now. You know, we was trying to beat him to death, and now he's standing here talking to us in our own language. That don't make no sense. So they listened. He said, "I am verily a man which am a Jew, born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, yet brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous toward God, as you all are this day. And I persecuted this way unto the death, binding and delivering into prisons both men and women." So he's telling them, look, I used to be just like you. I was the same as you are. I was, you know, he stood and watched Stephen be stoned. He said, I was zealous toward God as you are. He's saying, I was just like you. I persecuted all the way unto death. I threw people in prison, both men and women. I threw them into prison. And also the high priest does bear me witness. So he's bringing in, okay, now here's y'all's supreme authority, and he can bear witness to me. The high priest does bear me witness, and all the estate of the elders, from whom also I received letters unto the brethren, and went to Damascus to bring them which were there bound unto Jerusalem for to be punished. So he's saying, you go ask the high priest, and he can tell you the last of what I did was I was on my way to Damascus to arrest a bunch of people. I was going to bring them back. They was going to be punished. And he said, it came to pass. Now here's where he's fixing to let them know a little bit about who Jesus is. And it came to pass that as I made my journey and was come nigh to Damascus about noon, suddenly there shone from heaven a great light around about me. Now these people would have understood the fact that God spoke to prophets and that he manifested himself in different ways to different people over the course of the Old Testament. So and I fell unto the ground, and I heard a voice saying unto me, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? So he's saying, look, God talked to me. This is something that they can understand from their own scrolls. And I answered, who art thou, Lord? And he said to me, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you persecuted. And they that were with me saw indeed the light. So everybody saw the light and were afraid, but they heard not the voice of him that spoke to me, because he was only speaking to Paul. He wasn't speaking to the rest of them. He was only speaking to Paul. And I said, what shall I do, Lord? And the Lord said to me, arise and go into Damascus, and there it shall be told thee of all things which are appointed for thee to do. So what Jesus told him, he said, look, get up and go on where you's going. You's headed to Damascus, go on. Go on to Damascus. And when you get there, then I'm going to let you know what you're supposed to be doing. And when I could not see for the glory of that light, being led by the hand of them that were with me, I came into Damascus. So he's going over the whole story with this crowd of people. Probably the biggest crowd of people he's ever spoke the gospel to. And one Ananias, a devout man according to the law. See, okay, Ananias, he's a devout Jew. According to the law, having a good report of all the Jews which dwelt there. So he's saying, look, Ananias is somebody y'all can put a little faith in, and you can have confidence in, because everybody liked him and everybody knew he's a good Jew. This guy's a good Jew. Come unto me, Ananias came unto me and stood and said, Brother Saul, receive thy sight. And that same hour I looked upon him. And he said, he's not attributing this to himself. He's saying, look, Ananias told me. And Ananias is one of you all. That the God of our fathers has chosen you, that you should know his will and see that just one, and should hear the voice of his mouth. For thou shalt be his witness unto all men of what thou hast seen and heard. And why tarriest thou now? Arise and be baptized and wash away thy sins, calling on the name of the Lord. So he said, look, Ananias told me all this. I didn't make it up. I didn't make none of this up, because I'm not even attributing this to me. I'm attributing this to something that God told somebody else. God told Ananias this, and he told me. And when it came to pass that when I was come again to Jerusalem, even while I prayed in the temple, I was in a trance, and saw him, Jesus, saying unto me, Make haste and get thee quickly out of Jerusalem, for they will not receive thy testimony concerning me. This has become very evident today, this day that he's speaking. They will not receive your testimony. So Paul's telling them, look, Jesus already told me how y'all's going to act. He already told me y'all wasn't going to receive me. And I said, Lord, they know that I am imprisoned and beat in every synagogue them that believed on thee. And when the blood of your martyr Stephen was shed, I also was standing by and consenting unto his death, and kept the raiment of them that slew me. So he's saying they're not going to hear you. And he said, well, why? Here's the thing. Why? Paul may be kind of questioning Jesus, because he said, why would they hear me? Because they know who I was. They know that I imprisoned, I beat people, I put them in jail, I watched Stephen die, I even held the coats while they did it. So Jesus, and he said to me, Depart, for I will send thee far hence unto the Gentiles. So it's like Jesus said, look, if they're not going to hear you, I'm going to send you somewhere where they will. And what did Jesus tell the disciples at one point? If people don't hear you, shake the dust off your feet and move on. So he said, if they're not going to hear you, I'm going to send you someplace where they will hear you. And he said, I'm basically, in that one sentence right there, I will send thee to the Gentiles. In that one sentence right there, Jesus has just made the confirmation that he's going to allow everybody in. Because Jesus himself said, go to the Gentiles. Which, that statement right there is one of the reasons that we get to sit here today and know that we're going to get to go to heaven. Because Jesus told Paul to go to the Gentiles. Yeah, there's a lot of speculation about that. If the Jews had accepted him, would we have been grafted in? We don't really know the answer to that. All we know is that we are allowed, and if they will believe, they're also allowed. So, mm-hmm, 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 mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Either way. So even in the Old Testament time, he was allowing Gentiles to come in. Jerry. every step from Genesis 1 up to today, every step is what brought us into this room today. And that's one thing I didn't mention a while ago. Ananias was a devout Jew, yet he was the one chosen to bring Paul the affirmation from Jesus. Mm-hmm. There's always going to be something, whether it be this stuff here, the Islamic faith, whatever. There's always going to be something, as long as this world stands, fighting against Christianity. And it's always going to be vocal. It's always going to be loud. It's always going to try to sway all the people it can sway. Right? That's right. Mm-hmm. Well, to go back to what Jerry just said a while ago when he said about God not being surprised, and he said God didn't say, "Oh my goodness." Well, see, really and truly, God's the only one qualified to say, "Oh my goodness," because we can't say that, because mm-hmm, 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 mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost as if the Jewish people at this time were ignoring the faith of the forefathers and just saying, "Look, yeah, Moses did bring a law down, and Moses did say this is the law you're supposed to keep." But Abraham found favor with the Lord, and he couldn't have kept that law any more than anybody else. And so, whatever whatever there was going on at that time, the same Spirit works today. Mm-hmm. That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Frank, you want to say something? Mm-hmm. That is. Mm. Well, see that's the thing about the Muslims. They don't deny the existence of Jesus, and they don't even deny he wasn't on the right track. They admit he was a great prophet, but that's all they admit to. Well, Isaiah's a great prophet. Moses is a great prophet. They're attributing Jesus to the same thing as that. They're not accepting his messiahship, which is exactly the same thing that the Jews do. So we're going to have that until we leave this world. That kind of thing's going to be going on. So he's telling them they Jesus sent me away from y'all, and said, and they gave audience to his word, and then lifted up their voices and said, "Away with such a fellow from the earth, for it is not fit that he should live. And as they cried out and cast off their clothes and threw dust in the air, they still wasn't convinced. The chief captain commanded him to be brought into the castle and bade that he should be examined by scourging, that he might know wherefore they cried so against him. So, and as they bound him with thongs, Paul said to the centurion that stood by, is it lawful for you to scourge a man that is a Roman and uncondemned? So he kind of kept that to himself until it was needed. He was. And so when the centurion heard that, are you going to scourge an uncondemned Roman? I think that's against your law, basically. So he went and told the chief captain, said, take heed what you do, for this man is a Roman. Then the chief captain came and said to him, tell me, are you a Roman? And he said, yeah. That's just, yeah, okay, I'm a Roman. And the chief captain answered, with a great sum obtained I this freedom. And Paul said, but I was freeborn. Then straightway they departed from him that which should have examined him. And the chief captain also was afraid after he knew that he was a Roman, because he had bound him. On the morrow, because he would have known the certainty wherefore he was accused of the Jews, he loosed him from his bands and commanded the chief priests and all their council to appear, and brought Paul down and set him before them. So everything they were fixing to do, that one sentence changed it all. I'm a Roman. And you can't do this to me because I live under your law also. And your law says you can't beat a man or bind a man that's uncondemned. So he got all the Romans. And not only did he get all the Jews stirred up, he got all the Romans stirred up. He got the Jews stirred up out of hatred for him. He got the Romans stirred up because they're afraid of him now. They're afraid of him now. What's he going to do now? He can get me killed. Yeah, this chief captain is thinking, okay, now if he goes to my superior and tells him what I did, I'm in some deep trouble. So one side hates him, the other side fears him, and what's end up happening is he's going to walk on off, and everything's going to be okay for now. That's chapter 22. We're about time. Anybody got any other comments? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they could have gotten, the Jews could have gotten in trouble for trying to do what they were doing to a Roman. So, it's kind of interesting because if you think on it on those terms, all Paul had to do when he walked back into Jerusalem was say, I'm a Roman. And none of this would have happened. Mm-hmm. So, all right. Anything else? Mm-hmm. 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 We're, yeah, we're all interlocked some way or another. All right. Well, we'll be ready for 23 next week.